Hello and welcome to the Safety Goals Podcast with Justin Torres and Charlie One, presented by InjureFree. This is episode 5 with our special guest, Chris Brown.
Justin, I'm excited to have Chris on the show today. He spends a good amount of time in the youth sports safety market, speaking with administrators and health systems across the country. So he's going to have some unique perspectives about what's going on and what's current today when we talk about risk management in youth sports.
Absolutely, and I'm really excited to hear more from him. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Okay, everyone, we have Chris Brown from InjureFree joining us. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Justin. Thanks for having me today.
Of course. And a big thing with Chris is that he brings a really unique point of view to the discussion about how InjureFree is used and overall just how different groups will use it, whether it's an organization or an AT. So Chris, I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit about your role within InjureFree.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with InjureFree for about 8 years now, and key focuses and my job duties have been in business development and sales, and really identifying where InjureFree fits into the ecosystem of athletic trainers and youth sports and medical services that are provided to make sure that we're protecting athletes and organizations from a risk management standpoint, and tracking injuries, especially concussions, and make sure proper protocols are followed by everybody.
Chris, before you were with InjureFree, why don't you tell folks a little bit about where you came from, some of the experiences you had inside the medical field, and I guess how that might apply to your day-to-day job as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I joined InjureFree, I was selling medical devices in the operating room. So working with surgeons and hospital staff to make sure that certain products were stocked and used, providing a lot of innovative technology. I was an independent rep, so I was able to take on new products that created some cost savings as well as better outcomes for folks. And knowing you and hearing about what you were doing and starting InjureFree, there was an aha moment I had when I was actually at one of my hospital accounts, and I was in the ER. I actually sold a device that the ER used for a pneumothorax, which is a collapsed lung. And while I was in the ER, I noticed a father come in with a son, and they were checking in at the front desk of the ER, and the father was explaining that my son, I think, has a concussion. And just kind of seeing the concern on his face, not knowing what was going on. Is the ER the right place to be? We know that there's going to be a nice hefty cost of going to the ER, but it was more about, is this the right place to be? Is there somebody in the ER that can diagnose concussion? Do they deal with pediatric injuries? Those sorts of things. And I've been in that situation as well, where you have your kid who's injured, you're not sure where to go, who to talk to, and you go to the ER and you end up getting a high bill and a kind of see you later, or go call your pediatrician and get a referral. So I was just kind of not disturbed, but I saw that there was an issue there with that process, and then learning and understanding a little bit more about what you were trying to do really kind of clicked, and I got excited about it and wanted to be a part of the journey. So
and what about what year was this ish in the bigger picture of things?
That was 2000, I would say 2015.
Okay, so right after every state passed their concussion law of some sort. Concussions were from 2009 to 2012 a legislative mandate in all 50 states. So it was right after that point, and you started with us working with primarily, we leaned into that medical advice, that understanding of the health system, where those key points of contact were, and so we're looking at about 10 years now since that moment. What has changed in your perspective after these laws have been put in place? What's really different in the youth sports world? Let's just focus on concussions for the time being.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of good work. There's a lot of organizations that help educate, the return to play policies and return to learn, especially with concussions. There's the heightened awareness on that. Education came into play, and uh, we've seen some changes. I still think, some of the educational components are a little bit loose and not as tied into a real educational, piece. Meaning, here's some information. We just need you to sign this and get it to us for our compliance. But is there a real understanding of, what is a concussion? Where do you go? Signs and symptoms, things along those lines. So there's been a lot of efforts in it. I just don't think that there's been any real accountability or a driver to make sure that everybody's doing what they should be doing. We still see a lot of reports and articles coming out where there were EAPs, there wasn't an athletic trainer on site or medical services to identify if there was a concussion or anything like that. So we still see the issues happening, and there's always going to be those issues. But I think we've seen the legislative pieces push to get states to adopt, some of these policies. But again, it's who's holding them accountable. What are those checks and balances, and how do we improve all of that for all these kids that are playing?
Sports are in full swing 24/7, which means athletes are bound to get injured. InjureFree is a software platform used by youth sport organizations and schools that was developed to help coaches, parents, and administrators communicate injuries that occur and ensure a safe return to play. These sports safety networks are essential for sports teams working to provide the safest possible environment for their families. For more information or to schedule a demo, please visit www.injurefree.com. That's www.injurefree.com.
And you can't have somebody out there going from school to school or from youth sports organization to youth sports organization. There's no possible way to enforce those kind of mechanics. So it's more intent of these laws that you're suggesting being in play here, rather than there's a fine or there's an enforceable mechanism if you're not educating your parents, or if you're don't have an established emergency action plan, things along that nature. Because we know that there's not enough athletic trainers out there to cover the youth sports market in high school. So, why do you suppose these laws are in place if there's really nothing anybody can do about them? Who are they intended to affect in the bigger picture?
Yeah, well, I think the maybe one of the key problems is that these are unfunded mandates, right? There's no money behind it, so there's no mechanism to say, here are the things that you're supposed to do or required to do, and here's a way to do it.
Wouldn't that be an insurance policy or some other mechanism that financially can motivate organizations to follow that letter?
Absolutely. I think, some sort of financial incentive, reduce premiums, reduce costs, money to put athletic trainers in for, money for their salaries to go find and put athletic trainers in these environments are some key things that could be done. But again, it's more like it's here's what you're supposed to do, but we're not going to help you get there, but you may be held accountable if there's some sort of catastrophic event.
And it seems like in these scenarios, though, there's a lot of pressure on, if we hire an athletic trainer, then they're going to satisfy all of our needs, right? And we've seen the reports even today, not enough athletic trainers, school districts now under pressure. It seems like we're still living a decade ago in the same talk track. So who else in this ecosystem do you feel can play a role, or what are the solutions for us to be able to take some of the pressure and burden off one person in a high school covering 1,000 or so athletes?
Well, I think, taking a systematic approach to all of these processes, communication, reducing a lot of the administrative burden that comes into play, but essentially taking in a centralized system, taking the athlete as kind of a hub and spokes that are kind of going out to each person that oversees this athlete. So in a school, you could say it's the district personnel administrators, school nurses, athletic trainers, hopefully coaches, parents. So creating this ecosystem where everybody is on the same page from an education standpoint, compliance standpoint, communication standpoint, is going to better serve not only just the athlete, of course, but the organizations themselves.
I think I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I mean, I think, I was a former athletic director, been in those roles before. Getting everybody on the same page is almost impossible. There's always going to be folks who just aren't going to comply. So if we're in those situations, and one of the talk tracks we hear out there now is that if you can't fund an athletic trainer, well, then you shouldn't be having your athletic programs. And I think, there's another example, especially in an American culture. How are we even good? I mean, that's never going to happen, right? We love our sports. We want kids out there being physically fit, participating in teams and as much as possible, getting that value out of sports in a high level. So who else can be, if it's not these individuals, or if we don't have the funding to do it? I mean, what other examples have you seen, or who have you talked to, where they're putting together scenarios that can accomplish a same goal, but without some of those key, pieces into the puzzle that everybody's relying on to this, at this point right now?
Yeah, I think, there are some examples where schools take this on from a risk management standpoint, and they put systems or processes in place. In most cases, they're still a bit manual or fragmented. But looking at how we can innovate and perhaps place technology in to help kind of cover those gaps in communication or in reporting, and informing everybody, I think are some solid ideas. I mean, the first thing, the best thing that you could do is have an athletic trainer there. But to your point, not everybody can have them. There's not enough athletic trainers. So what can you do? How can we get an athletic trainer involved in the process, even though maybe they're not on site? And I think it takes some evaluations as well as looking at what are the benefits if you do have them in place. Is it reducing costs overall to the school for insurance or claims or things along those lines? And if we're able to look at those numbers and look at where those processes can be improved, then it begs the question of what can we put in place to expedite a lot of this and centralize a lot of this, and get more information back in, some data, to be able to analyze and say, this is working and this is what we can do, and this is how we're going to achieve this goal, whatever it may be, of getting an AT, or even just creating an ecosystem that's has oversight of the athletics and all the athletes and injuries that are happening.
Not many youth sports administrators began their careers with the dream of negotiating insurance rates. Most have a love and passion for the game and saw it as a way to inspire the next generation of youth athletes. However, nowadays, insurance can be the single greatest cost for a youth sports organization. At American Sports Insurance Services, we've done the work for you and created the single most comprehensive youth sports insurance program on the market. We did it by aggregating the largest youth sports injury database in the world. Let us do the heavy lifting and represent you for all your risk management needs. For more information or to get a quote, visit www.getamsis.com. That's www.getamsis.com.
And we've seen these models in play. We've seen outreach programs where health systems or nonprofit organizations supply and fund those types of positions and help to develop those ecosystems. What have you seen recently on some of the trends, say going back pre-COVID, 5-6 years ago? What have you seen as as some of the trends now, as these programs continue to either stay in place or expand some of their outreach programming?
Yeah, there's a few different ways that this is being done. We have health systems, connecting with high schools and districts, supporting them from a sports medicine side or medical side. In some cases, they'll provide the athletic trainers to the school for some in-kind services, ability to advertise and market as the health system in the area, maybe for parents to go to. We also see the direct hire model where schools are hiring an athletic trainer as a W-2, which is a great program as well. And then we also have our per diem groups where the schools are hiring a company to staff their athletic trainers. Those are the three biggest models that we've seen out there. I think they all have some benefits, some have issues. Some of the trends that I've noticed in the past and sometimes currently as well is the consolidation of some of these health system outreach programs where maybe they don't see the benefit, maybe they're having a hard time staffing their athletic trainers, and therefore they're pulling the athletic trainers from these assignments and eliminating their contracts because it's either not worth it to them or they can't seem to be able to provide those resources as far as staffing ATs go. And
so without an ROI, then they leave the schools without medical coverage within a year's period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a financial component that's there, and it makes sense. Hey, if we're gonna supply athletic trainers to your school as a representative of our health system, what we're hoping is that your athletes and the parents will engage with our service lines and come in, which is a good thing. They're getting services, specialty services. They're getting expedited care. But there needs to be a return on that. It's a business. Health systems are businesses, so there needs to be a return on that. Now, some of the other programs, kind of like you mentioned, where they're nonprofits that fundraise to place athletic trainers, they fundraise for money to be able to pay the salaries of athletic trainers, and they place them. The only problem with that is that in some cases there's not a model in place that creates a sustainable, scalable model. It can sometimes be more short term because those organizations are at the mercy of what's coming in donations, right, to be able to provide athletic trainers and put them out there. So we're constantly seeing this scaling like up and down of athletic trainers out in the environment, and then being eliminated from those positions, and for the various reasons I mentioned. But there needs to be a systematic approach or something that shows a scalable and continuous opportunity to keep that program going.
Sustainable in that regard, right? There has to be an ROI for whomever's producing the funding, it seems, without a dedicated funding line coming out of a school or district. But that, and that addresses the what, 8 million out of the 45 million student athletes in the country every year. There's still a good portion of kids out there in the youth sports environment where getting an athletic trainer to some of these youth soccer fields or any of these remote areas is almost impossible. So we've seen telemedicine begin to start to play a role there. I wonder if you've heard of that or any kind of models that you've seen that have been working in any of the conversations you've been having.
So yeah, the telemedicine piece I think picked up some steam, especially during COVID. It was being a little bit more adopted there because folks didn't want to go to the hospital and potentially catch COVID or be around a bunch of sick people. So we saw some companies kind of pop up and try to enter the space, really more focused on, I think, primary care. But I think we see a huge advantage when we're able to plug it into the youth sports model and being able to connect, medical services, athletic trainers virtually, right from the field. If we're documenting incidents using some sort of technology on the field, maybe a coach enters, the initial assessment of information or a parent volunteer. Now we're creating this streamlined care coordination process where we're connecting with an AT. They could be anywhere. They could be in the same city. They could be in another state. And now we're triaging that injury with information that a medical expert's getting and providing that to parents. Here's the best, here's the best direction I can give you. Don't go to the ER and walk out with a huge bill and basically, hey, you need to go get a referral.
Of course, only in those cases where, it's not a life-threatening situation, right? I mean, we're talking about knee injuries, ankle sprains, shoulders, hands, things that aren't necessarily life-threatening. So there is a, but again, it speaks to having an emergency action plan. If certain types of incidents are occurring, what do we do? How do we do it? What are the plans and protocols? How do we stop, follow those steps and ultimately taking the best care of the kid? But it seems like in those scenarios that we need more than just one person. We need to scale a model that is sustainable. So everyone playing a role in some way, shape, or form. If you're representing an organization, you're involved in a process, not necessarily leaning on one particular person to do that. It has to be the answer because there's just too many kids out there playing sports these days, right? I mean, we just don't have that time. So, hi, my name is Charlie Wund, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Agency for Student Health Research. When I started the company over a decade ago, I aimed to help reduce injuries within youth sports. Since then, InjureFree was created as a risk management software platform and has grown to become one of the leading injury reporting platforms used by thousands of athletic organizations and schools nationwide. Our expansive education library and reporting technology provides the tools administrators need to take the pain out of risk management. As a former high school athletic director and youth sports organizer, I understand the regulatory compliance requirements and need for individual accountability. Our goal is to provide a service that does better than checking the box. For more information or to schedule a demo, please visit www.injurefree.com. That's www.injurefree.com. Well, it's fascinating to hear about, some of these intricacies that I don't know. I'm not sure a lot of people think about. I mean, certainly when you sign your kid up, you're not thinking about them getting hurt and needing medical attention on the sideline. That's not what's the first thing in our minds as parents when we sign our kids up. So I guess given what you, as a closing thought here, some of the, again, going back to the trends, where do you see some sparks? Where do you see some successful models taking us in the future? And I guess to throw a second question on that, if we don't change, where do you see us being in another 5 years from now?
Yeah, well, I'll address the second question there. If there is no change in the next 5 years, we're going to be in the same situation, status quo. I mean, we've had, I think the number's 37% of high schools in the country have access to athletic trainers, or at least full time. That number has been the same since I can remember, since I started, working with InjureFree here and understanding the environment. So that hasn't changed. That number hasn't really changed, and so that's kind of concern. And it just goes back to, what are we focusing on, or what are we doing wrong? And how do we get to a point where there are more out there, and understanding the numbers, that there's not enough athletic trainers going into school to come out to take on that profession, or they're going into other environments with athletic training. They're going into industrial, military, or they're just, a 1099 contract covering some accounts here and there as needed. So I think innovation is key. I think the industry needs to grasp on and identify the need for innovation and technology. We see this happen in lots of other business environments, or innovation is key to keep going to scale those businesses and those careers. So I think it's time for us to really nail down the true benefits of putting innovation in place, getting athletic trainers out there, using technology where we can provide the feedback and the data that says this is the right direction. that we're reducing XYZ costs, injuries. We're providing some real data that's able to be used to say this is where we need to go. And I just don't think enough of that has been done. So when we talk about the AT industry in schools, especially in schools, not specific to youth sports, but in the high school or educational market, it's always about cost and budgets. But what's not really discerned or looked into is what are the costs saved when we have an athletic trainer. When we identify those numbers, it leads into all these different areas of insurance premiums being reduced potentially, and increasing the wages of the athletic trainers, because we're seeing the benefits where parents are, not having out-of-pocket costs, and the schools potentially or hopefully are reducing not only just the number of claims, but the amount of those claims as well. The athletic trainers are providing medical services on site, manual therapy, injury prevention, care, all of that, and they're not billing for it. They can't. So you're getting all of that done, and all of those savings from scheduling appointments and taking off work to take your kid in to go get a referral, and you're getting that all expedited with this medical expert. That is key, and we need to keep driving that point in the savings that's provided with an athletic trainer. So if the salary goes up of an athletic trainer, more people are gonna come in. It costs a lot of money to go to college and get that master's, which is a new requirement, by the way, to be certified and licensed. So that's going to have to be looked at deeply, and we're going to have to find out how we can get that information, that data, and put it out there and drive it.
Seems like with everything else, it always comes down to the almighty dollar. And in the case of children's health, it's a shame that we've got to have that conversation, but it does need to make dollar sense and just sense in general as well. So. Well, we appreciate you sharing some thoughts and keeping the conversation going. We're excited to be able to support a lot of these discussions with not only a lot of our guests on this podcast, but also a lot of research and data that we're going to be publishing this year about a lot of these trends, and just sharing, because a lot of this is being documented. There's a lot of folks that are saying the same things. It's time to get that word out, and that's our intent. So thanks, Chris, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking some time.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it, guys.
Of course. We would like to thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Safety Goals podcast, presented by InjureFree. I'm your host, Justin Torres, and a big thanks to our special guest. And also, thanks to my co-host, Charlie Wund. To listen to other episodes of the Safety Goals podcast, check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.